Hello, my friends. Welcome back. This one begins at an auction, and it ends with a guitar. Hold both of those. They are connected. And the connection, when you hear it, is going to stop you cold. But first, I need to tell you about a room going quiet. Because there is a specific kind of silence that only happens in an auction house when the number on the board becomes something that stops making sense. Buried in this story is a guarantee, a money-back guarantee, that a motorcycle manufacturer offered to every single customer. A guarantee so confident, so specific, so public that it should have been impossible to keep. It was never once claimed. Not by a single person. We'll get to why. The room goes quiet. A motorcycle has just rolled onto the stage. It is old, built in 1938, and it has not moved under its own power for decades. It is painted a deep, dark color, and the chrome on it catches the light the way chrome only does on a machine that has been cared for by people who understood exactly what they were looking at. The auctioneer opens the bidding. By the time the hammer falls, the number on the board reads $880,000. For a motorcycle that most people in that room, and almost everyone outside it, have never heard of. For a machine built by a company that produced fewer than 75 motorcycles in its entire existence. For a bike whose name, if you said it aloud to a room full of motorcycle enthusiasts today, would draw blank stares from the majority of them. The name on the tank is Crocker. And this is the story of the most extraordinary motorcycle America ever built that almost nobody remembers. And why? When you hear what it did and why it disappeared, you will not forget it again. The man who built it was not a rebel, not an outsider. He spent years inside the motorcycle industry before he ever built one of his own. And what he learned in those years is exactly what made the Crocker possible, and exactly what made it impossible to survive. Albert G. Crocker did not arrive in the motorcycle business by accident. He had spent years inside it, first as an engineer at Thor Motorcycles, then at Indian, where he ran the Los Angeles branch and understood better than most what the American market wanted and what it was not yet being given. By 1928, he had his own Indian dealership in Los Angeles. By the early 1930s, he was building speed parts and performance kits, modifications that made the bikes he sold go faster than their manufacturers had intended. His customers noticed. His reputation grew. In 1932, working alongside a man named Paul Bigsby, a machinist and engineer who would later become famous for an invention that had absolutely nothing to do with motorcycles, Crocker began building his own machines. Speedway bikes, initially. Single-cylinder dirt track racers for the oval circuits that drew crowds across California. But the speedway market shifted when British engines arrived and undercut what Crocker was building. So in 1934, he and Bigsby made a decision that only two people who had spent years close enough to the industry to see its gaps could have made with confidence. They would build their own motorcycle, not a racer, a road machine. And it would be faster than anything Harley Davidson or Indian had ever produced. What they built in 1936 was so far ahead of the competition that Harley Davidson, one of the most powerful companies in the American motorcycle industry, reportedly began applying pressure to suppliers behind the scenes to make sure it stayed that way. Whether that pressure was decisive or not, what it tells you is this. The people in Milwaukee knew exactly what had appeared in Los Angeles, and they were not comfortable with it. The Crocker Big Twin appeared in 1936. Its engine was a 61 cubic inch overhead valve V-twin, the same displacement as Harley's new Knucklehead, which had also just arrived that same year. The similarity ended there. Crocker's engine produced somewhere between 55 and 60 horsepower. Harley's Knucklehead managed 40. The Crocker ran aluminum cylinder heads when Harley was still using cast iron. Its compression ratio was 8-to-1 when Harley's was 6.5. It ran hotter, harder, and faster than anything coming out of Milwaukee or Springfield. Top speed, over 110 miles per hour. In 1936, on a public road motorcycle. And Al Crocker was so certain of what he had built that he offered every customer a guarantee that no manufacturer before or since has matched in quite the same terms. If any Harley Davidson or Indian motorcycle could outrun your Crocker, he would give you your money back. The guarantee was never claimed. Not once. Not by anyone. Word spread through the California riding community with the particular speed that only genuine performance can produce. Riders began calling the Crocker the nightmare of Harley and Indian, because both companies understood that something had appeared in Los Angeles that made their best machines look slow. But here is the thing about building the fastest motorcycle in America. It does not make you rich. It does not protect you from economics or wars or the weight of building every single machine by hand, one at a time, for a market that is simply not large enough. And what Handbuilt actually meant in that Los Angeles workshop is something worth understanding, because it explains both the legend and the scarcity in the same breath. Every frame was hand-brazed by Al Crocker himself, or under his direct supervision. The cylinder heads were cast in aluminum, then machined to the specific compression ratio the customer requested. Engine displacement was not fixed. Customers could order 61 cubic inches, or 74, or 80, or in at least one or two cases, 90 cubic inches. Each specification changed the build time. Each machine was, in a meaningful sense, made for the person who ordered it. This was not a production line. It was closer to a bespoke tailor's workshop that happened to produce motorcycles instead of suits. The price reflected this. A Crocker Big Twin cost $495 at a time, when a Harley Davidson knucklehead cost $380. The Depression was still casting its shadow across the American economy. Riders who could not afford the Harley certainly could not afford the Crocker. By the time production ended, Al Crocker had built somewhere between 68 and 75 Big Twins in total. Historians still debate the exact number because the records are incomplete and the machines themselves are so scarce. Of those, perhaps 6 to 8 remain in running condition today. The rest exist in museums, in private collections, under glass or behind rope, handled by people wearing cotton gloves. And before we reach the end of the Crocker story, before we get to the war and the last engine and the door closing for good, there is one detail that does not belong in a motorcycle story at all. A footnote that stops being a footnote the moment you hear it. Because the man who sat next to Al Crocker and helped build the fastest motorcycle in America went on to do something else. Something that is in every music collection you have ever owned. Paul Bigsby, the engineer, the machinist, the man who helped design and build the Crocker Big Twin in that Los Angeles workshop. In 1948, after the Crocker years had ended and the shop had gone quiet, Bigsby invented a device for the electric guitar. A mechanical tailpiece that allowed a player to raise and lower the pitch of the strings with a lever. A smooth, wavering pitch effect that became fundamental to the sound of American popular music. The Bigsby Vibrato. It has appeared on more guitars than most people could count. Its sound is in thousands of recordings across 7 decades. It is, in its field, as revolutionary as what Bigsby helped build in Los Angeles in the 1930s. The man who helped build the world's fastest motorcycle also helped shape the sound of rock and roll. History filed both contributions under different headings. They came from the same hands. But back to the motorcycle. Because by the late 1930s, the forces working against Crocker were not just economic. Something else was happening. Something that several historical accounts describe in very specific terms. And that tells you something uncomfortable about how industries protect themselves from people who threaten them. There are accounts, not conclusively proven, but repeated consistently enough in historical records to carry weight, that Harley Davidson applied pressure to its network of parts suppliers, making clear that any supplier who sold components to Crocker risked losing Harley's business. Whether this is true in every detail or not, the practical effect was real. Crocker found himself manufacturing more and more of his own components, increasing both cost and build time, in a market already too small for what he was producing. He was building the best motorcycle in America. And the best motorcycle in America was being assembled one at a time, by hand, in a country whose economy had only recently begun to recover from its worst decade, in a competitive environment that had little interest in making room for him. And then, on a Sunday morning in December 1941, everything changed for everyone. What happened next was not a business failure. It was not a competitive defeat. It was something more final and more specific than either: a date, a door, and a decision that a man made with clear eyes. The last Crocker Big Twin carries that date in its engine number. And when you hear it, you will not need me to explain what it means. On the 7th of December, 1941, Japanese aircraft attacked Pearl Harbor. The United States entered the Second World War the following day. Within weeks, the federal government imposed strict controls on critical materials: aluminum, steel, magnesium, directing raw materials toward war production. Small civilian manufacturers without government contracts could not obtain what they needed to keep building. Al Crocker received a contract from Douglas Aircraft. He would manufacture precision components for military airplanes. Steady work, profitable work, important work. He accepted. The last Crocker Big Twin was built in 1942. Its engine number was stamped 42.61, the 61st engine of 1942. The frame was finished. The machine was assembled. And then the doors of the Crocker shop closed on motorcycle production for the last time. After the war ended, Al Crocker did not return to motorcycles. He had looked at the aerospace business and seen margins, stability, and a future. He had looked at the motorcycle business and seen, in his own words, too much competition and too little profit. Nobody made the decision for him. He was not forced out. He simply looked at two roads and chose the one that was not the Crocker. He stayed with aircraft components until his death in August of 1961. And what he left behind, those 68 to 75 machines, has done something in the decades since that no production strategy, no marketing campaign, no manufacturer's decision could have engineered. Scarcity and perfection, left alone long enough, produce a result that the original price of $495 makes completely impossible to understand. Until you see the number. Today, the machines Al Crocker built in that Los Angeles shop are among the most valuable motorcycles on Earth. The $880,000 auction result is not an anomaly. A 1939 big tank sold for over $700,000. A 1936 small tank reached $750,000. Estimates for the last machine ever built, engine number 42.61, approach seven figures. One Crocker Big Twin is worth, in the current collector market, approximately 10 Harley Davidson knuckleheads from the same era. The company that could not afford to compete in 1938 has, in 2024, produced the most expensive American production motorcycle ever made, simply by running out of them. And here is the truth that sits underneath all of it. Not the auction numbers, not the rarity. Something harder to say, and more worth saying. The Crocker was not defeated. It was not outcompete. Kawasaki did not arrive with a better machine. No rival engineering team built something faster and cheaper and put Crocker out of business. The Crocker ended because a war ended the supply of materials, and because the man who built it decided, with clear eyes, that the market was not large enough to sustain what he had created. The Crocker was too good for the world it arrived in, not in a romantic or tragic sense, in a precise, practical, financial sense. Too hand-built for Depression-era prices. Too fast for an industry that preferred to move slowly. Too small in production to survive a material shortage. And when the war ended, its creator was gone to a different industry, and nobody else knew how to build one. What survives is the machines themselves. Fewer than 75. Perhaps 6 still running. Each one worth more than most houses. Each one carrying, in the particular way that truly rare things carry their history, the memory of a Los Angeles workshop, 2 engineers, a money-back guarantee that was never claimed, and the fastest motorcycle in America in 1936. My friends, some things are too good for their moment. Some work is so precise, so carefully made, so far ahead of what the market is ready to value, that the people who do it leave almost no trace while they are alive. And then, decades later, the world catches up and cannot believe what was almost lost. If your best work has not been recognized yet, if what you are building seems too careful, too considered, too expensive for the room you are currently in, the Crocker is worth remembering. Not as comfort exactly, as evidence that the work itself outlasts everything else. The market, the competition, the war, the silence. 75 machines. 6 still running. $880,000. The room was quiet when the hammer fell. It always is, for things that were made right. Before you go, tell me in the comments what surprised you most. Was it the money-back guarantee that was never claimed by a single person? The engineer who built the world's fastest motorcycle and then invented the Bigsby guitar vibrato? 2 revolutions from the same hands? The last machine stamped 42.61. Built as a war was beginning and never followed by another? The accounts of Harley applying pressure to suppliers to slow Crocker down? Or the auction number, for a name most people have never heard? Subscribe if you want to follow these roads wherever they lead. Until then, build it right. The world will find it eventually.